Hello, welcome to this webinar. This is my first time doing something like this, so it's a little bit of an experiment. And I'm just excited to share a lot of different things about being a music teacher over the years. I've kind of come up with a good amount of outside of the box techniques and things like that. And the reason this came about is I had asked a few months ago on Instagram if there were a lot of music teachers who were interested in learning about some of these other techniques that I had been doing, and there was a pretty positive response. So I'm trying this for the first time. I've never used YouTube Live before. I'm going to attempt to record it because I've gotten a lot of messages from people who aren't available today and tomorrow, and this way I hope they'll be able to see the recorded webinar. I'm going to do my best, but like I said, this is my first time. I'm also not used to not seeing people that I'm speaking with. So if you'd like to engage in the chat box, I'm gonna just type something in there right now. This way, if you have questions, things like that, I'll do my best to address those as they come up. And this, by the way, I'm not actually selling a course or anything like that. I'm really just wanting to connect, expand my network with other music teachers. I do a lot of composing and working as a clinician, and I'd love to meet other music teachers for band, chorus, orchestra, or something else. And also, I think, these are just kind of ways that I've found to get kids excited about music. And the more of that we all do, the better we all are going to be off with it. Okay, so because I'm doing this YouTube Live format, I usually am used to doing talks with like lots of visuals and videos and things like that. And there is a way to do that with YouTube Live, but it's a little complicated, and I thought I would keep it simple this time. So what I'm going to do instead is I put together this document, and it has links to other things. Like if I'm going to mention, here's what you could get to have your orchestra do this, or here's a link to someone demonstrating this piano technique that I'm talking about. It's going to have all of those in there, and I'll put it in the chat now. And I'll probably put it in again later in the chat as more people join. And if you registered, then I have your email address, and I'll send a follow-up email that will have that link for you there. So if you want to take notes, of course, you're welcome to, but I've also kind of put everything out there in this document. Some of the links rather on the document are for products that I'm going to mention. I'm not actually like hired by any of these companies. If they are an Amazon product, which I think like 3 of them are, then I've used an affiliate link, which means it costs the exact same amount as anywhere else you get it, but it'll give me like some small commission for it as well. And by the way, I'm going to say one more thing, and then I'll start getting into some of these techniques that I'm talking about. The reason this all came up for me as a teacher is about a decade ago, I started working as an orchestra director at a very small private school. And the orchestra program, by the time I got there, had dwindled down to 3 students. And they all played the exact same instrument, which was piano. And I thought, what am I going to do? What on earth am I going to do with 3 pianists at the same time? And I spoke to a lot of people on campus, and I had gathered that part of the issue there in this particular school was that it just wasn't cool to be an orchestra. And it was something that kids got a lot of flack at the time from their peers for. And so I kind of thought, well, I have this problem. I have 3 kids that are playing piano, and I need to get them to do something that is going to make this look really neat to their peers. And so I started coming up with all these neat techniques. And so the first things I'm going to share are very easy. They have to do with using a piano. So if you have an acoustic piano, you can do these pretty neat techniques. Even, by the way, like bowing the inside of the piano is surprisingly easy. But in order to understand all of these piano techniques, there's one thing you have to understand about how a piano works. And if you're a pianist, I'm sure you already know this, but it's really important to go through this really quickly, just so that it will make sense. When you push a key on the piano, there are 2 things happening mechanically on the inside. So if you could imagine, if you think about like a grand piano, so the strings are this way, imagine my arm is a string. The first thing that happens when you push a key is that there's a hammer, and it hits the string, and that makes the string vibrate. That's where the sound is coming from. That's the obvious thing. But the thing that is a little bit less obvious is there's a damper on top of the string. And when you hold down a key, the damper lets go, and that lets the string vibrate. When you let go of the key, the damper goes down. So for all of these techniques, part of the key is to get those dampers to go up. Otherwise, these things won't work. And there's a few ways to get those dampers to go up. If you're a pianist, I'm sure you can think of a bunch of ways, but I'm really just going to talk about 2 of them that are the easiest ways without getting too specific for pianists. The first way, the most obvious way, is if you hold down the sustain pedal, So you hold like, pianos, the pedals sometimes do different things, but the pedal that's all the way to the right, unless it's broken, will always do the same thing. And that is it's going to lift up all of the dampers. And that means all of the strings are free to vibrate. In fact, if you hold down that pedal and all the dampers go up, and you take the back of your hand and just swipe across all the strings on the inside of the piano, they'll all sound, they'll all vibrate. So you can actually pluck the strings that way. If you have an upright piano, depends on what the model is, but you can open up the top and you should be able to do the same thing just vertically. You'll put your hand in there and you can swipe across. And so plucking the inside of the strings is a really neat thing. The problem with holding down the sustain, if you want to pluck the inside of the strings, is you're going to get every single string vibrating. So a really neat effect that you can do is if you push down on a piano key very, very lightly and you hold it down, you won't push it down so hard that the hammer will hit the string, but what you'll do is you'll just make it so that the damper lifts up. I know this might be like tricky to imagine in your head, but I have video links too that will demonstrate this. So I'm going to say it one more time. If you just push the piano key down very, very softly, the damper will lift up. And now that string is free to vibrate. Now, what that means is if you hold that down and you swipe across the inside of the piano, only the note that you're holding down will vibrate. Everything else will just kind of stop immediately because the dampers are holding that down. And you could hold down a chord, like you could hold down, let's say, a C minor 7, and you swipe across the inside, only the notes that you're holding down are going to actually make a sound. So you can have, if you have a couple of students, you could have one or two of them holding down chords and then someone on the inside plucking the strings. You could actually like pick out each string one by one. That's really tricky when you're looking on the inside of the piano to know, oh, where's that A flat? And you have to kind of hunt around for it. Sometimes people label the notes individually, but that takes a long time. If you just hold them down, swipe across, that is a really, really easy way to do it. And to make it one more step interesting, here's how you can bow the inside of the piano. It starts off pretty much the same way. You're going to hold down those keys very softly so that the dampers lift up. And now when I say I'm bowing the inside of the piano, imagine like a violin, right? And you have the bow and it goes across the strings and it makes that sound. Well, if you take a violin bow, you're not really going to be able to do much with it inside of the piano because the violin bow is flat and it'll just go against this whole bed of strings. So what you do, and I apologize to any piano technicians, I think they're not huge fans of this, but it works. It might be a little bit messy, but it works. You take fishing line, like if you go to a fishing store or a sports store or whatever, you take fishing line and you get some rosin. And if you're not a string player, rosin is just basically if you see like a cellist or a violist or anyone who plays a string instrument, they take rosin and they'll put it across their bow hairs. And that's what's going to make the bow grip onto the strings. But now what you're going to do is you're going to take the fishing line and you're going to just basically rub the rosin all over the fishing line. Rosin is cheap. You can get it at any string store, any music store pretty much should sell rosin. And then you're going to thread, if you could imagine like here's a piano string, just thread the fishing line around the string and you can have students bowing like this, holding the fishing line. So just to give you the big picture, you could have some students holding down the keys softly, and the other students have the thread looped through, and they're bowing the inside of the piano. Okay, now, if you got that document that I sent, and I'm going to put it in again, because more people are joining us. So on my Google Doc, if you scroll down toward the bottom, I'm going to look at it right now too. The bottom section says demo links. And there's the first one there says the bowed piano ensemble. And so you can see what that actually looks like. Now that's kind of like, a very 20th century example, or maybe 21st century. But the next thing I'm going to say is also 20th century. What I mean is it's going to sound a little bit like, sort of abstract music that we might expect with something like this. But with my students, we played Imagine. So, you can do whatever piece of music you want and create this really neat ethereal effect that people are going to love. Okay, the last thing that I'll mention with the piano is a lot of people don't realize you can actually play harmonics on a piano. So, guitar players, strings players, they're very used to playing harmonics, but it's not something you usually do with a piano. But there's all sorts of really, really cool effects you can do. Again, if you hold that note down really, really softly, now a string is free to vibrate. So let's say you're holding down the note A. Well, you can actually lean into the piano and sing the note A, and it will make the string sympathetically vibrate. So this is a really cool effect. And if you hold down the pedal, the sustain pedal, so all the dampers lift up, you could have someone yell something into the piano, like yell hello really, really loud. And all of the notes that are making up all those partials in their voice that they're singing, those strings will sympathetically vibrate. So you can actually do this with harmonics too. And this one is a little bit tricky to describe. So what I did is I made a video. Again, it's in that demo links page, and it's actually me just showing with a grand piano how to do this. It's on my Google Doc. But basically the process is you're going to hold down one of those keys, and you're going to play really hard and really loud and really short the fundamental that would go to that partial. That might not make sense, but in that link, because I'm going to move on to the other stuff, I don't want to talk about it for too long, but in that link, I'll walk you through the entire thing, and I'll show you, like, here are the notes to hold down, here are the notes that you play, here's how you get a harmonic. You'll be able to hear it really, really clearly. I just want to mention it here so you know that that's an option. Another really cool thing, I'm going to move away from piano now, is, okay, lots of music teachers use this, but there's some other neat ways you can use these. Boomwhackers. These are, if you're not familiar, these are kind of like plastic tubes, and each one makes a different pitch when you whack it against something. So there's one that says C on it, and when you could hit it against your hand, or you could hit it on the floor or whatever, and it'll play a C. So I've seen this used a lot, especially for like elementary music education. But I had a high school chamber ensemble, and there's this amazing video I linked again in the demo links part, where there's a French juggling troupe, and they're in a circle tossing and catching these boomwhackers, and it plays Bach C major Prélude as they're doing it. It's pretty amazing to watch. I contacted them, actually, this was years ago, and asked for their notes about, how did they actually do this? And I don't think they're musicians. Or maybe most of them aren't musicians. And I got this kind of crazy Excel sheet that showed who had what tube at what time. And it turned out it was easier to just assign each one of my students to be one of the people. So, okay, you're going to be the guy with the long hair and the ponytail, and you're going to be this person. And we just watched that video in slow motion many, many times, and we replicated it. This was really, really hard to do. It took a lot of time. But I want to just zoom out for a second. Remember, I was working at a high school, and we were going to festivals. Like, we were going to, I don't remember at the time, the Heritage Music Festival, or maybe Forum Music Festival. And we're competing against much, much bigger, more established orchestra programs. And we're not going to be able to, do what they can do. But there are some really fun things that we can do that maybe you can't do with 200 kids on a stage at the same time. And this was one of them. I could have my whole chamber ensemble in a circle juggling with these boomwhackers. And I tried this at one of these festivals, and it was a huge success. I mean, everyone watching was so enthralled with it. I think we did that, and maybe we did some of the other things I'm going to talk about. And I remember one of the judges immediately after walked over to my department chair, and he said to him, "Whatever you're paying that man, give him a raise." So it was just like a really, really exciting, fun thing. The kids loved it. It was a lot of work. It's probably maybe the most complicated thing that I'm going to mention here. But if you have some students who are really, really strong and up for a challenge, that could be a fun thing to do. The boomwhackers, if you go on my Google Docs link that I put out there, under the product links, it's the first thing that I put up there is boomwhackers. I put up a link for a large set and a small set if you want to check those out. Okay, a Talkbox is really, really fun to use. And people, I think, are more intimidated than they should be about a Talkbox, because it's actually not that crazy. The Talkbox, have you ever seen like Peter Frampton, or sometimes you'll see a guitar player or a keyboard player, and they have this tube that goes into their mouth. And what it looks like is that they're singing in kind of a robot voice, and somehow they're playing notes, and somehow they're putting words on the notes. A lot of people think that this is like, that there's software involved or computers involved. This is really, believe it or not, extremely low tech. And if you haven't seen this, I hope that makes sense, but you can easily YouTube that and see what I'm talking about. But a Talkbox is actually super, super low tech. All it is really is it's a tube, and the tube is a speaker. So if you could imagine I'm playing a keyboard, right? And I have an amplifier where the sound is coming out. Well, when I'm using a Talkbox, instead of the sound coming out of that amplifier, it's just coming out of this tube. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to put that tube in my mouth, and I can shape the sounds of my keyboard into words. So you have to imagine this. When I'm speaking to you right now, there are two things happening. One is my vocal cords are vibrating. Like if you touch your neck while you're speaking, you can feel that vibration. But the other thing is with my mouth, I'm shaping all of that sound into consonants and vowels, right? I'm using my lips, my tongue. And so what this is doing is now, instead of you vocalizing with your vocal cords, the tube is going into your mouth. And so you play a note on the piano or you play a note on any electric instrument that's connected to this thing. And it's going to go into your mouth. It's going to bounce off the back of your mouth and come out. And you can shape it with your mouth into words. So the sound is coming in, you're moving your lips, you're moving your tongue, and that's what's shaping it into words. It's actually very, very low tech, believe it or not. It's really kind of an amazing invention. The thing is, some of these sounds are really easy to make, and some of these are really hard to make. So, and I'll tell you where you can get a Talkbox and how you can even make one in just a moment. But I just want you to be aware, if you have a student using one of these things, if you put this into their mouth and you, for instance, you go wah, 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 but instead of making a vocal sound, you just go like this, it's a very easy sound to make. So you'll hear a lot of people who are just kind of messing around with it. They make that W sound because it'll kind of just happen. But if you wanted to make some other sounds, they could be really hard to make. So for instance, if you want to make a sound with an S, it's a really hard sound to make on a Talkbox. And the reason why an S or an H sound is really hard to make on a Talkbox, especially for students who are learning, is those are sounds actually, if you think about it, the S and the H are not produced by your vocal cords. S is coming out of, I think it's called aspirated, right? S is going like this. I'm producing the S without actually using my vocal cords. And same thing with H. So it's a little confusing for students. I mean, if you try this yourself, you can see how it works for you, and you can kind of coach them on it. But when you want to add an S sound, you have to actually do that sound yourself a little bit. So you might go sa, and then shape the vowel sounds with your mouth. And same thing with an H sound. One last technique for this, and then I'll talk about how you actually get the Talkbox and all that kind of stuff and what you do with it, is I've noticed this. I've never heard anyone else talk about this, but I've just noticed that for some reason, it's easy when my mouth is shaped. I don't know if it's going to make any sense. My mouth is shaped the way that I would sing those notes. So I'm a bass voice, and if I play notes in a bass range on my keyboard or on a guitar while I have a Talkbox, it comes out pretty well. If I do some really high notes, it just doesn't work that well unless I pretend that I'm going to sing those high notes. I don't actually sing it, but I guess contract. I'm not 100% sure because this is not my field, but it's maybe the larynx is contracting in a way that's like preparing my voice, my mouth, as if I'm going to sing those high notes, and that helps it come out faster. Okay, what do you do with a Talkbox? So for my students, I made an orchestra arrangement of a Daft Punk song, Harder, Better, Faster, Stronger, and it was a huge, huge, massive hit. I want to say, by the way, like all these examples that I'm using, my kids learn Beethoven too. So I'm not throwing out the baby with the bathwater, but this was just every semester doing one really fun outside of the box thing is a really great way to build your program, to build excitement around your program, and to kind of get word out there that music can be really fun. On my docs, I'll talk about where you can get the Talkbox now and how you can build it. On my docs, there is a link for, let me see, if you go down, it's actually at the bottom of my product links. It says Talkbox, and you can get a Talkbox there. You can actually build one if you want a project or if you want to give your students a project there. I've never done this, but I put a video in my demo links where you can see how to do this. If you're just joining now, by the way, I'll add that Google Doc again in the chat. So you can actually build this pretty easily. If you take a small speaker and then you put a funnel, you could tape the funnel to it, or if you want to minimize the buzzing, you could glue the funnel to the speaker. And at the end of the funnel, you just take a tube. So you could take like $5 worth of parts from a hardware store, assuming you have a little speaker you can use, and you can build your own Talkbox. It's a super easy, fun project that you can do. I've never done that. I've seen people do it, and I put a little link down at the demo links showing, it's called Talkbox DIY, and you can see somebody do it. It's like a 1-minute video. It's really, really neat. Okay, Whirly tubes. These are, if you remember, at least for me, when I was a little kid, there were these little tubes that you could get at these, like, I don't know, dollar store or something like that. And you spin them around and they make a whistling sound. Well, you can use these to make music too. The problem is the whirly tubes, they don't say this one's in B flat or this one's F. They don't say that. So you have to do that yourself. So what I did is I had my kids play Take on Me, and I got two of them that I cut down to be half step apart, and we could have one go like Take on Me, and we could do that very, very simple, with these whirly tubes, but it was a really, really fun, neat effect. What you're gonna do is you take an X-Acto knife, you take a little tuner. So I had my Dr. Beat, and you can leave that tuner on and just kind of cut it down little by little until you can find out what note it is. And then once you know what the note is, you're gonna take some tape measure and you're gonna see how long it is. So make 30 inches gives you an A. I'm just making this up. That's a really important number. And then you're going to take that information and you're just going to do a little bit of math. And basically, I know it's hard to imagine. So again, I made a YouTube video. It's on the demo links. And on this video, you can see exactly how I do it. There's a page on Wikipedia. You might remember from music school. Maybe that was recently, maybe that was a very long time ago, but you might remember learning about Pythagoras and having these different ratios, like the ratio of how you go from one note up a perfect fifth. And you might remember that, like, if you have, maybe this will sound familiar or maybe this won't. If you have a string and it's this long and you have a string exactly half that length, that's a ratio of 2 to 1, then it will go up by an octave. So if you have a whirly tube and it's 30 inches and you want it to be an octave higher, cut it in half, make sure that it's 15 inches, and then it should give you exactly an octave higher. You're probably going to make some mistakes. So get a bunch of these things. They're super cheap, but get a bunch of them and try to cut a little less than you think you need, because you can always cut more. You just can't build it back more. So again, I've got a YouTube video on my demo links page, and you can see exactly how I did it there. By the way, I'm just going to point out, if you don't mind, if you haven't already, if you would subscribe to my YouTube channel, that's always a huge help. That will, help get notified when other videos come out and things like that. All right. There's one more thing that I'm going to mention about these extended techniques, and this is the most complicated one. It's how to use a video game controller to make notes. I put up an Instagram video a while ago where I showed this, and so I had like this kind of thing, Super Nintendo controller, and I did a couple of things with it. One is I could rig it to like a piano keyboard, so I could make every one of these buttons play a different note, so I could actually play like a Bach Prélude. You have to remember which note is which button. But then another fun thing I did is I had my kids play an arrangement of Super Mario music, and I found all of these different sounds from like the original Mario video games. So I kind of rigged this up. So like maybe this button would be the sound when Mario jumps, and maybe this sound would be the sound of when he goes to the flag. And by putting all these things together, I had one of my percussion students actually be like the drummer. By using these Mario sound effects, each button was making one of these different sound effects, and you could kind of add a lot of fun to playing some Super Mario Brothers music. So there is a video that someone already made that walks you through the step-by-step of how to do this. And I put that again in the Google Doc. You're just coming in. I'm going to put the Google Doc in the chat again. And you can see where someone is like actually walking you through step-by-step. But I'm just going to give you a couple of tips for this, because I found also a little bit of a shortcut, especially if you're on a budget. And by the way, I don't recommend doing this one unless you're pretty tech savvy, because this one is kind of tricky. You're going to want, first of all, a video game controller, and it has to have a USB input. So something that you can plug into your computer. And if you have like one of the newer Apples like I do, you just want to make sure you have an adapter that this can plug into. The second thing you need is a program called Joystick Mapper, which is, when I checked, $4.99 on the App Store. I'm using Apple products. So what Joystick Mapper does is it'll basically tell your computer that whenever you press this button, it's the same as pushing the letter A on your keyboard, for instance. So it's mapping these to something on your computer. That's the second thing you need. So far, everything is pretty cheap. By the way, I did not add any links to any video game controllers because I found there's kind of two ways to do this. You could use a real video game controller if you play video games, or what I did is I went to Amazon and I got these really, really super cheap controllers. Like, they're generic, but the problem is, in my experience, sometimes they don't work. Sometimes they're just really faulty kind of pieces of junk. And I don't want to put something like that on the affiliate link because, I don't want you to go out and buy something and then it turns out it doesn't work. So, read the reviews, try to do your research. But if you already have a video game controller, you can use whatever you've got. If not, you can make a choice if you want to buy the real deal or if you want to get kind of a generic thing like this. Okay, there's one more thing that you need to make this work. And this one is expensive, but I have a workaround for it. The other thing you need is some kind of version of Ableton Live. Now, if you were just going to the store and you're getting Ableton Live, it's really expensive. It's, depending on which version, I think it's like between $350 and $750. As an educator, you get a 40% discount to that. By the way, there's no affiliate links for this, but I did put the product links on that document, so I'm not getting anything out of this, but if you want to get Ableton, you can get it there. But I have a workaround where you can get this, I think, a much better deal on this and come out ahead too. If you get something like this is called a Launchpad, and this is just like a really fancy, fun MIDI controller. So all of these buttons, you can also do all sorts of music stuff. This is a whole separate thing, which is also a lot of fun. I'm not going to go into this for the sake of time, but what I want to tell you is, if you get a Launchpad, there's like a Launchpad Mini, there's different versions, and some of them are as cheap as $70. It comes with a version of Ableton called Ableton Lite. And once you have that from buying your Launchpad, you don't need to buy Ableton Live anymore. So now, for much less money than buying Ableton Live Studio, you not only get access to Ableton, but you also get this. And this is a really, really cool toy too. So if you go on my, on my links, under the demo links, there is one that says how to MIDI map a game controller in Ableton Live. Oh, and by the way, on the very bottom of that, you'll also see how to use Whirly tubes for music. And that one I put up. So you can see all of these links right up there. Okay, those are my outside of the box strategy things I want to tell you about. I want to be respectful of everyone's time too. I have a couple of other things I want to mention. I'm going to do it really, really quickly. But while I'm doing this, if you have any questions that you want to put in the comments, feel free to do that now. I also want to mention, one of the reasons that I wanted to connect with other music teachers is I really love working with other music teachers as a composer, as a clinician. I'm really lucky to have gotten to study under some amazing composers who write for school ensembles like Donald Grantham and Morton Lordson and Frank Tikelli. And so I really wanted to start building up some of that repertoire for myself as well. And I've started putting, I started actually focusing this summer on choral music. I mean, I've written for just about every kind of ensemble on the earth, but choral music was a really easy entry point because what I can do is, for instance, I made this arrangement of Silent Night, if you want to add that maybe to your Christmas programming, and I can take the same arrangement that I made, and then I have a version for SA and a version for TB and a version for SATB and for SAB and all these different things. And so I'm trying to just use the same arrangement in multiple voicings because I think that's something that can be tricky to find. I also try to make these arrangements pretty interesting. So if you go on my Google Docs, it says My Choral Music at JWPepper, and I put links to 3 things. One is Silent Night. I've made this arrangement of 3 Yiddish songs. These are like really gorgeous, amazing, beautiful songs. Just, I've noticed, I think they don't get performed anymore because people are intimidated. Where are you going to find someone who can tell you how to pronounce any of these words? So I've actually recorded my voice speaking through the text. And so you have access to that as well. And then I also put a piece of mine that's published by Santa Barbara called To the Moonbeam, which is very accessible 2-part piece of music. So if you're at all interested in programming any of those pieces, one thing that I really love to do is work with choirs by either doing a Zoom session, or if they're local, or if they happen to be in the area where they are, sometimes I'll stop by. It's really, really amazing to get to work with kids and to get their reactions and things like that. I also do talks to schools about music, and I also work with ensembles as a clinician. So if you're interested in any of that, my email address is at the bottom of this document. It's DavidAsherBrown@gmail.com. So please, I would love to hear from you, and just reach out. And with that, I'll save the rest of the time if there's any questions. Let Let me just see. Oh, thank you for that comment. Yeah, it's been really exciting to see all of the amazing feedback that I've been getting from all sorts of different musicians since I started doing really this big Instagram project back in about January or so. It's been really, really incredible getting to work with so many people. So thank you so much. And I'm going to be trying to do, well, I'm definitely doing another webinar tomorrow. If you have anyone else who's interested, I'll try to post this one as well as a recording. I'm going to find out how easy that is to do. And any other questions, if you'd like to work together, if you're interested in having me zoom in with your ensemble, if you're interested in having me do a talk at your school or writing a piece of music for your ensemble, please, please, please reach out to me. My email, again, it's on that Google Doc. I'll put it one more time in the chat. And I'll email this to anyone who registered. My email, again, is davidasherbrown@gmail.com. I'll put that in there as well, davidasherbrown@gmail.com. Okay. Thank you again so much. And I look forward to hearing from some of you in the future. Bye-bye.